Well, welcome everyone to A Better World Begins Within. So, the purpose of this show is to demonstrate what is possible for any of us when we decide to go within to find the answers that we're looking for during challenging times. So, on the show, what we're going to do is we're going to share stories about people who, like all of us, have experienced some struggles and challenging times in their life, but who have discovered that a better world out there begins by creating a better world within. And so today, this is the first ever episode of A Better World Begins Within, and I'm super excited to have my friend Johnny King on the show because he's just doing some really amazing things. So Johnny King is a men's transformational coach. He's a public speaker, an author, and an entrepreneur. And over the past decade, he's led multiple successful businesses. He's devoted his efforts to help men heal their emotional wounds and to improve their lives. Johnny rose from the ashes of a failed marriage, massive debt, and extreme loss of income to become the man that he's always wanted to be, while being a guiding light for others and equipping them to become kings of their own kingdom. So there's a lot in there, Johnny. You're the founder of Meeting of Men. You've got a podcast, Becoming Kings. You have a book that just came out. You're the creator of the Brotherhood of Men. You're just doing some really amazing things for the world. What is it like? What does it feel like to be in a position where you get to have such a positive impact on the world?
Well, I would say first and foremost, before I answer that, thank you. It's an honor to be on the show. It's an honor to be on the flagship show, the first and only. Really, really cool. And I'm excited to see where this goes for you. And likewise, man, you just since meeting you and over the last year, just your inspiration of real estate deals that I'm getting into and various other things. I appreciate you paving the way in many regards too. So thank you for that. Yeah. So the question was just what's it like to do inspiring things? Is that the question?
Yeah. I mean, you're in a position that you get to lead this life where you have the opportunity to create these things that provide fulfillment within yourself. What does it feel like to be, it's never perfect, right? It's not like you live this perfect life, but what's it feel like to be in a position where you get to influence the world in a way that you've wanted to for quite some time?
It's interesting you say that because I think the Sunday school answer would be like, oh, it feels amazing. And if I'm being totally honest, I struggle sometimes with acknowledging my own greatness. I think a lot of people do. And it's a pet peeve of mine. I see people like stand up on stage and they receive an award and they're like, man, I'm nothing special. And if I can do it, you can do it too. And I'm like, that's such a load because we're all special and we all have the potential to be, kicking ass and taking names.
Right.
And yet for a lot of us, and I can just speak for myself, a lot of times I feel like I don't acknowledge the good things that I'm doing, So yeah, the book and the podcast, and yet I have a way of just continually, I think that's part of the human condition is battling against the belief that we're never enough, So that's so much of what I'm battling for right now is like to just, man, I know I'm going to look back at my life 10 years from now. And I know things will be amazing then, but I'll also be like, oh man, remember when I was in my early 40s and I didn't have any responsibilities and I can do whatever I wanted to do. And yet I'm always, I think our culture is always conditioning us to strive for more and someday we'll get there, And so I do appreciate that acknowledgement. I think there are moments and I'm really trying to capture more and more of that, just being present with this moment and giving gratitude for all that, that I'm blessed with and to really then stay humble and just and to really kind of zone into the fact that I'm just a vessel. I'm just a clear window pane and I'm just being shined through, quite frankly, and my job I feel like in this human experience is to keep working on taking that mud off the window pane so I can keep letting the light shine through me. But I'm not the source of that light. You know what I'm saying?
Well, and that's a great analogy, you know, taking the mud off of the window and letting that light shine through, because it's not that we ever arrive. It's not a destination. We don't show up one day and it's this magical thing and we're fulfilled. It's done,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's just not the way
Yeah.
that it works. Part of the fulfillment is the journey itself. It's the work itself. It's the cleaning the window off that is actually what ultimately creates the fulfillment. Would you
Yeah.
agree with that?
Yeah. Yeah. And I do feel like, though, the masculine expression that men and women all express a lot of times is that focus on completion. It's oh, once I get there, then I'll be able to experience bliss and freedom. It's like that moment of ecstasy when you're having, intimacy with your partner. It's like, but those moments are fleeting, right? And I agree with you that the reality is that it's really more about the man or the woman that we're becoming in the process of achieving our goals. Because I think a lot of us have experienced achieving a goal and be like, oh, is that it? Like, I thought it was going to be so much more. I thought my life would change, right? And so the older I get, the more mature I come into the understanding that money in the bank, health, all those things, we have to be grateful for those in the present moment, and yet those don't make the moment.
Right.
They're just environments or conditions in which we can choose to kind of focus in on, or we can let kind of escape away.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. You know, they're things to enjoy, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they're not necessarily the end game. And
Mm-hmm.
so, you know, given this kind of what you were just talking about, how, you know, you're at this point in your life where you are doing all of these amazing things, and yet at the same time, uh, you still, this is what I heard, so correct me if I'm wrong, there's still, you feel like you could do more, right? There's always something more that you could do. There's always more growth that you could make. There's always more people that you could help, or maybe even more money to make, or more influence to have, or you know what I mean? All of these things. So there's still more to
Mm-hmm.
do. But you've also come so far. So let's go back in time for a moment, and let's talk about where your journey really started, right? We don't need to talk about, like, you know, the rainy day when you were born, and but like, where did your journey really start, where it's something switched, something changed within you? You know, where were you before that moment, and what was the catalyst that started to propel you in a different direction?
Hmm. That's a great question. I believe it kind of, the first record scratch, if you will, to my life as an album came when my mom passed away when I was 26. Um, I just envisioned she'd grow old and be there for my future children, and play grandma and everything else. I was very close with my mom. Simultaneously, I was very couldn't have been further away from my father, and I had a lot of resentment, a lot of anger, because he was more or less a workaholic most of my life, working through his own challenges, which I didn't fully have the empathy for at the time. So it was, my mom passed away. I got married the next year. My father came out of the closet, which definitely kind of was the second
Oh, wow.
major record scratch of my life. Just in terms of like, oh, that I didn't see that coming.
Right.
And then 6 months later, roughly, the ex-wife asked for a divorce. So that, I would say, the divorce ultimately was like finally things like, okay, like the first punch in the gut was my mom passing away. Like, okay, this is crazy. And I reeled from that. And then my dad came out. I was like, oh man, I was really reeling. Like, is this, what is going on with my life? And then when the divorce came, I finally was like, okay, third time's a charm, in terms of like, okay, wake the F up,
Right.
because this is not going the way you thought it was going to go. And you can either become a victim to how this is all spiraling out of control, or you have to change your mindset towards life.
Yeah, and I don't mean to interrupt, but I just want to stop you there
No.
really quick, because to have that kind of thought right? You got to stop playing the victim and start doing something different, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That doesn't have to happen. There's a lot of people that get into these types of scenarios. And real quick, that was over the course of what, like 3 to 4 years, all of those 3 years.
3 years. Yep.
So it was a pretty short period of time. There's a number of people that might turn to drugs, they might turn to food, they might turn to alcohol, they might turn to all sorts of other destructive, addictive behaviors to just cover it up and
Yeah.
and say, woe is me, I can't believe this is happening to me, you know, the world sucks, whatever. What do you think contributed to your ability to say, all right, I have some responsibility here. What can I do to get myself out of the victim mentality?
One of them, I think, was just like an innate feeling, or maybe even just part feeling, part questioning of like, am I really special? I feel like there's something in me that's called for something greater.
Mhm.
And yet I was growing up questioning, like, well, where's the battle? Like, I'm not living in the 40s and I'm being shipped off to war. I'm not living the Great Depression. I'm not living like life had been pretty harmonious. Like, where's my my challenge,
Mm-hmm.
my call to adventure? So I feel like there was part of that there, but then a lot of it was I had just gone to Tony Robbins for the first time shortly before the divorce came. And thank God for that gift, because I would not have been able to get through the like my the the sky falling in my life if it weren't for hearing some of the things in my head that I had been just listening to over the course of months and months and months of listening to Tony Robbins to and from work. That's all I
Mm-hmm.
was doing, was pouring him into my brain. And I remember him, something came into my mind when I was having kind of, I've never really thought about it, but I guess I was kind of having a panic attack or a mental breakdown, whatever. It was like the quote that he says, like, the quality of your life is directly proportional to the quality of the questions you ask yourself. And
Interesting.
so the questions I was asking was like, why did this happen to me? Why was I such a horrible husband? Why did mom have to pass away? Why is dad not there? I was asking a lot of why questions, and why questions, unfortunately, bring a lot of victim answers. Typically, they'll trigger our deeper wounds.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, I kind of caught myself. I was like, those are really, really crappy questions.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, what? And Tony would say, like, you have to catch yourself and ask a more empowering question. And it's funny, I literally was like going through what I had experienced in a seminar of his in real time when I was in my apartment by myself with no furniture left. It was raining outside. I was standing at the window and I was crying as hard as I felt like it was raining out. And I was really having kind of like one of those come to Jesus moments. And I was like, okay, the question came into my mind. It's like, how could this moment be like that defining moment, the pivotal moment? Like, if I'm watching or writing the autobiography of my life right now,
Mm-hmm.
how does this change the trajectory? Because I could easily have gone and started becoming an alcoholic in that moment, or a
Mm-hmm.
drug addict. Like, I could have been down, and I just decided, like, no, this is going to be the moment. And so I asked another question of like, okay, what do I have to give? You know, and the thought came to me, doesn't matter. Just like I think that's an angel message. It's just like, just give. Whatever you have, just give. And that led itself, the abbreviated version of the story, led itself to starting my first gym, starting my first business, helping women who were much like my mom in the Midwest, just struggling with their health and their weight and their emotional eating and everything else. So
Yeah.
that's kind of how it started.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's an amazing story, and you know, there's a lot going on there. I think one of the things that's so important to recognize there is that when we try to do it all alone, it becomes nearly impossible.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to do it all alone for a long time, and it led me to a very dark place in my life. And once I realized that other people might actually be able to give insight that I hadn't really thought about yet, and once I opened myself up to new ideas, that's
Yeah.
when I started to make the shift in my life as well. And, you know, it sounds like something very similar to you. For you, it was Tony Robbins. Um, and so I think that's just really important for anybody who's watching this to understand that if you feel like there's nobody out there that can help, There absolutely positively is. There's lots of people out there who, for one reason or another, have dedicated themselves to making the world a better place
Mhm.
because that's what they believe in and that's what they want to do. And they want to turn people who are struggling into people who want to help.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of power in that, so
100%.
so I just think that that's really amazing. um okay, so you started these gyms, you start helping women uh create better health in their life, lose weight, these kinds
Yep.
of things. Eventually you obviously got away from the gym. So what happened there? What created that transition in your life? What was going on?
Just my own continual growth. I just was noticing that I mean, I think it was, again, the best thing that could have happened to me was having grown up without my much of a male role model in all aspects of that growing up. I found myself easily in the pattern of finding my self-worth through the validation of women, starting with my mom, right? If it wasn't my mom, it was my school teacher. If it was my school teacher, Sunday school teacher, it was my school, as I got older, it was my girlfriends, you know, platonic friends. I always had a lot of friends, but um, there was a deep wound there. And
Hmm.
so, sure enough, my mom passed away, the ex-wife left. Um, I found myself building that business still with a big motivation, not only to give, but really to fulfill my ego.
Hmm.
And then I had all these like women very similar to my mom who were pouring into like, oh, you're amazing. And blah, blah, blah. I was like, oh, stop it. And it just got to the point, honestly, where as I continued to work on myself and to grow and to find my sense of self-worth inside versus outside,
Hmm.
I started to lose my motivation, quite frankly, to work in that industry, to work in that.
Right.
It's like I kind of shed uh that skin,
Right.
and I was reborn, and I kind of then shifted into like, what, I just started feeling more and more called upon. And I had three different women who none of them knew each other, all within the span of 30 days, tell me I need to work with men. And so again, the third time's the
Wow.
charm. I finally was like, okay, God, I hear you. That's when I was like, you know what? I need to step into working with men because I'm actually really scared of that idea. And so that's why I need to step into it. So that's kind of how I shifted out of working with women and moving more into men
Right.
over these last like 2 or 3 years.
So do you talk with men about those kinds of those kinds of topics where, uh, you know, once again, some people might look at this transition and say, I don't want to work with men. And then boom, it's just excuse central, oh, well, I'm not going to do it. Right. I mean, it's easy to find a million excuses to not do something. And you
Mhm.
said, okay, I have this sign and I really don't want to do it. So the fact that I really don't want to do it is actually a sign that I should do it. You know what I mean? That's that bravery piece, right? It's this looking a fear in the eye and having an understanding of what's really going on, right? You knew that you weren't growing enough working in the way that you were working with people at that time, and you had this intrinsic motivation to grow, and
Mhm.
that meant that you had to make yourself uncomfortable. You had to do something that was not what you would normally do, and
Yeah.
instead of walking away, you faced it head on.
Mhm.
What was that experience like for you, actually working with men for the first time, developing your trainings and your courses and things like that? Like, was it difficult? Did it flow? What was that like?
No, extremely difficult, extremely intimidating, because I
Mhm.
think again it triggers the whole thought was like, how am I going to? My ego was stepping in. How am I going to teach men how to be men?
Mhm.
You know, when I don't even know what it means to be a man myself.
Right.
And I have all these failings and everything else. And I didn't. I had this story,
Yeah.
and I think again the bigger thing I really had to step into is like, I'm not teaching men how to be men. If anything, they're joining me. I'm joining them on the journey of just self discovery.
Yeah.
So I had to take myself out of that kind of like hero coach position, which is where I had positioned myself with women,
Right.
again, to feel validation. And the more I let go of my ego, and the more I just say, you know what, like I'm here again, super solely as a vessel to just give and give and give, the easier it's become because I no longer see my this guy as competition. I see him as my brother, you
Mhm.
know. And when he's my brother, man, I'll die for him, you know, and hopefully vice versa, right?
Right.
I'll go to war with him, and we are going to war against generational shame and trauma and pain and woundings, and like that's what we're up against as men now.
Mhm.
And if we don't do it now, then all we do is kick the can down the road for our children to do, you know. Someone's going to have to handle that stuff, you know. So that's just what I'm kind of fervently passionate about. Of it's like we got to do this now, otherwise it's irresponsible for us.
Right. And you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be Superman. You don't have to have all the answers. Listen, we're all full of shit. That's just the bottom line. Like, none of
100%.
us know what the heck we're doing. None of us. We are a bunch of little tiny kids, relatively speaking, just running through this crazy thing called life. And by the
Yep.
time we start to figure out a few things, we die. So, like, we really don't know what the hell we're doing. And I think the sooner that we all recognize that and lean into the fact that we're never going to be perfect, we don't need to be perfect, but we're open to new ideas and we're open to sharing our ideas, and we all start to work together, we start to evolve as men, as humans, as people, as whatever. We begin to evolve, and at the end of the day, maybe that's all we're really here for, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
Well, and to piggyback on something you said just then and something you said earlier, which is, you know, not to do this alone. Guys oftentimes, the masculine, and women do it too, but certainly guys do it. We tend to like to be isolated and be the lone ranger, the lone wolf,
Yep.
the type of I'm going to figure it out myself. But when I like literally the same weekend that that I found out the divorce was coming, I had hired my first coach, and I had him for 3 months, and he was the only thing that kept me from spiraling completely out of control and into nothingness. And he said, I was working on my first website, my first ebook, and I kept on rewriting the ebook because by the time I got to the end, I realized, oh, the beginning was not so good. So I'd rewrite the beginning, and then I realized, oh, I need to rewrite the end. And it's like, Johnny, when is this ever going to be done?
Right.
And I was like, when it's perfect. And truthfully, he knew that I was just scared to release it. But he's like, Johnny, what is perfection then? How will you know when it's done? I was like, I don't know. I just will know that it's done. He's like, I call bullshit because you're just scared. So he called me out. He's like, perfection, honestly, Johnny, is not the highest standard that we can live by. It's actually the lowest.
Mm.
And I said, say what? He's like, think about it. Because we inherently know that perfection isn't possible, you don't have a measuring stick in which to gauge anything because you can't get there. It's not possible. So thus, if you don't have a measuring stick, you actually have no standard. And it's no wonder then most people never either attempt something or it never gets completed because you're looking to accomplish something that isn't possible, right? And our subconscious knows it, right? Yeah.
Right.
So I thought that was pretty mind blowing. And it's like, okay, because we're not perfect, man, once I started, and thankfully, again, the mom passing away, my dad coming out, the divorce, all that's kind of triggered like, oh, my idea of a perfect life is kind of like gone. So might as well just embrace it. And I started putting out videos that were horrible. I still continue to put out podcasts. They're pretty crappy. It's just like, I just put stuff out and I just take action versus not taking any action because I'm so scared to put something out that has maybe some grammar that's incorrect. Like, you know what? I don't give a shit. Just get it out. Just go, you know, just get it out.
Love it. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
All right. So we've talked about some of your challenges that you've had in the past and all this work that you've done to get you to move forward. And you've done a lot of work. And we talked about at the beginning how that doesn't mean that you're done. It doesn't mean that you're perfect. It doesn't mean that you're all good. There's really no destination, right? So with all of that being said, what are some of your current struggles today? And how do you stay aligned with your purpose when you run into those kinds of challenges so that you can stay focused, so that you can stay energized?
I think I mentioned one of my bigger challenges, which is just acknowledging um, the abundance that is in my life right now. Just super, super easy for me to go into scarcity.
Yeah.
That's really easy, especially with kind of the craziness of the world. So I'm really oftentimes looking at how or if I'm giving away my power to anything, whether it be again the craziness of the world or something even locally, or again lack, any form of lack. And I've been really challenging myself to step more into like daily meditation. That's certainly helping a lot, which brings me back to homeostasis, like in this present moment. Some of the other challenges I think would be um, letting go of wishing life were different, wishing that I were married and had kids now, or wishing that my business were bigger, or wishing that I was healthier in one way or another, or that I had more friends, or like, man, there's always, again, it comes back to that scarcity mindset. And if
Fighting
anything, it
against
comes,
what is.
yeah.
Yeah.
And Byron Katie wrote, a book that's amazing called Loving What Is. And she has a kind of a 4-step turnaround process that she suggests in the book, and this, what she refers to as doing the work. And a lot of times I have to catch myself because it's just so easy, like I said, to fall into just complacency and and just not really giving enough, just kind of being like whatever, just being numb, and just being not being motivated. So I think a big part of that is like, yes, I'm doing a lot of things, and yet I don't acknowledge it, and I still spiral down that rabbit hole of not feeling like I'm enough. And that's may always be the challenge, but that's my desire in Becoming Kings, which is my book. It's my podcast. It's like helping, like you're a king not when you acquire shit. You're a king when you don't give an F about other people's opinions, when you're just so solid in integrity with your heart and your mind, and there's heart coherence, and you are just here to give, and you like people experience you as a king, and you're rock solid. Like that's a small portion of what I feel like a king is, and that's what I'm gravitating towards, hopefully.
That's a great definition of it. You know what I mean? Because it's not about being a big badass mofo, you know. It's about being in alignment. So can you touch on that for just a second? Do you have some quick, and I know obviously we can go really deep and far down the rabbit hole here, but do you have like a few pointers that maybe some men watching this could take away that might help them, if nothing else, just get started down that path? Some tools or tricks that they can utilize.
I could always listen to my podcast, read my book.
Yeah,
shameless plug. But I do feel like one of the fastest things, and I learned this from Tony Robbins, but man, has it become clearer and clearer as I've gotten older. One of the fastest things to change your mental state, of course, is to change your physiology, right? So we go into the gym feeling like crap, but typically we walk out feeling so much better, right?
Right.
But rather than thinking that needs to take a process of 45 minutes or an hour and a half to work out and then you feel better, you can change your physiology immediately, which is just even going outside and breathing and walking around the block, turning on something, that's motivating. Just put motivation video into YouTube and see what comes up, or call someone and think about actually giving to them versus calling them because you need support. It's like giving is, the secret to living, from what I've been educated and learned. Right. So right. I think that's the first step, which is like, just change your physiology. Because if you're depressed and you're laying on the couch and that's all you do every day, like you're not changing your environment, you're not changing your body, you're not changing your focus and your thought, then it's going to be really, really tough to begin that process of becoming the real version of you when you're stuck in that spiral and that behavior.
Absolutely. And kind of going back to what you were talking about earlier about how you had multiple opportunities in your life to make a choice. Do I spiral or do I take some responsibility and make a change? And so the fact of the matter is, these things that you're talking about, those are really great first steps because they're small, they're simple, they're just something, right? But until we take that first step, until we do something, it'll never change. It's going to be more the same today as it was yesterday. And it doesn't mean that tomorrow is going to be all of a sudden you're just this amazing, like I said, you've arrived, but if you do something, you'll be a little bit better tomorrow and a little bit better tomorrow. And I remember when I first got into real estate, I was so overwhelmed with, I do like 10 deals a year. And I was just like, oh my God, it's so much work. How do I keep up? And I've got kids, blah, blah, blah. And then I started to put systems in place and I started to get used to it. My presentations got easier, my negotiations and the contracts and everything got easier. And then all of a sudden I was doing 36 transactions in a year. And that was a lot of work, but I would think back to what it meant to do 10 and I'm like, child's play, so easy. I could do that and not even think twice about it now. And that's kind of how personal development is too. As we grow, it's like the stuff that used to be the bane of our existence and we thought was going to sink our ship. It's like, I got that now. I'm good. Now my struggle is this. And so our struggles become higher level struggles. They're still there. We're still growing. We're still moving forward, just in a very different way. And so we just get better every single day. But the key is action. Just do something.
Yeah. I think it's no different than the easy metaphor of looking in the gym. It's like, you want to actually obviously have a vision of what you want to create, but it's just little tiny actions, over the course of weeks and months, consistently done over time that creates greater capacity. Earlier this year, I started kind of really lifting. I was curling maybe 25 to 30 pounds, and that was tough. And I was super sore then. Well, just over this past year, putting on 15, 20 pounds. Now I'm curling twice as much, I could not even thought about doing that earlier this year. And now, but I'm just as sore as I was then. The pain is still right, but because I have the capacity in my arms, and it's no different emotionally as it is physically, as we get older.
Now you're huge.
Now it's super swole. Yeah. just killing it. But if I stop, right? If I stop doing the routines, it'll be 2 weeks and I probably couldn't even do 80% of what I'm doing now. Right. You have to be consistent. I feel like we're so much humans of creatures of habit, I guess, if you will, that like we are our rituals. And to your point, like yesterday, I woke up and I just felt flat and I kind of moped around for a little while. I was like, you know what? I have to follow my own advice. Went outside, went for a long walk with the pup. And I just kept on like, feel the warmth of the sun. Like I just was kind of faking it till I made it. And finally started kind of like being congruent where I'm like, I'm so grateful to be alive and to have my health and then I came back into the house and I felt so much better and I had a great day. But I woke up feeling like, and I could have let that day become a blah day easily. But I think that's just a good example of like, you're right. It never ends. You just have to keep doing the things that work. And they're not all that difficult. They're not all that difficult to understand, but sometimes they're challenging to implement, So I think that's why we need leverage. That's why we need little routines. We need, a brotherhood or just coaches such as yourself to help hold individuals accountable to do the stuff that we know we should do, but we don't do if we're left to our own devices. Right. So
absolutely.
I digress. Yeah.
And one last thing that I'll touch on here, and then we'll wrap things up. But when I was a teacher, when I was a student, and I taught science for a little while, but when I was a student and I was taking chemistry, I hated it. I was terrible at it. It didn't make any sense. And then I started teaching it. And when I started teaching it, I was like, oh my God, this is really interesting. I get it now. Okay, this is an ionic bond and a covalent, blah, blah, blah. And I actually enjoyed it at that point. And so you had said, maybe I should take some of my own advice today and go do, X, Y, and Z, go work out or whatever. And that just brings up one interesting point, is that when we look to find somebody else to teach and help somebody else grow, oftentimes we learn a lot more ourselves by extending that olive branch and truly trying to help somebody else. We just
Mhm.
learn more about the whole process. And so, just another example of why it's so important to give first
Mhm.
and try and help others.
Right. Well, and how many of my friends or family say, I've heard them say so many times that like, oh, you think that I'm teaching my children, man, they're the biggest teachers,
Yeah,
of life and for them in parenting. And it's like, yeah, sometimes we can we can if we can humble ourselves to be open, the teacher can be so many things in
right.
life. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. So, so we'll close it out with this. What are you working on now? How are you supporting other people? I know you got a new book, you've got a coaching program, things like that. And how can people find out more information about you and get in contact with you?
Yeah, easily would be going to johnnyking.com. That's where you can figure out where the book is on Amazon, or check out the podcast, or if they're in Denver. Even if they're open, if they're a guy listening to this and maybe they're not in Denver, they want to, start a meeting of men. I'm always looking for leaders who maybe want to start satellite meetings around the country, around the world. And then I also have my Brotherhood of Men, where it's kind of a virtual platform where guys can come in and get training, and for minimal cost of what one-on-one coaching would be with me, they can have that community and that brotherhood with other guys that are pushing to become kings themselves. So all that stuff is on johnnyking.com.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I would highly recommend you guys go check out his book, buy a copy. Um, I know there's some great stuff in there.
Yeah, thank you.
And yeah, so Johnny, I really want to thank you for being here with me today, and being the first person to show up on the podcast and really show up. You're just doing some amazing things for people, and I want to celebrate you for just a moment. Given all the struggles that you still face and all the things that you got to deal with, take a moment today and celebrate the amazing things that you've done for this world. And I know you won't do it out of a place of ego, but out of a place of humility. It's important as men that we find the time to celebrate what we've accomplished and what we do and how hard we work, so that we don't burn out. And it's okay for us to recognize that we're kicking ass and we're working hard, but we still have work to do. And so I just want to take a moment and recognize you, and once again, just say thank you for taking the time to be here with me and to be so open and to have these conversations.
Yeah, man. Well, thank you. I appreciate your friendship so much, and for being here. And I acknowledge you, but I received that. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, man. Well, thank you so much for joining me on A New World Begins Within. Remember, if we want to change the world out there, we got to change the world within here. Have a fantastic day. Hope to see y'all soon.